what did the reshuffle yesterday, which we talked about incessantly on the show yesterday, what did that actually achieve?
I think it demonstrated that Rishi Sunak is completely out of ideas. I mean, if David Cameron is the answer, you're asking the wrong question. I don't understand what his appointment will do, other than maybe a bit of internal party management with the left of the party, but obviously it's also succeeded in infuriating the right of the party. I can't think of a single constituency in the country who would be really excited about David
I know
Cameron.
who. Lord Heseltine. Remuneration Chief Lord Heseltine has been absolutely thrilled with this news.
I dare say he's probably about among a handful of people who actually are, because even the kind of liberal, rich people, home county rich people who used to love David Cameron and all he represented, they're furious with him over Brexit. The Brexiteers are furious with him over Brexit. It's hard to work out who is actually going to be impressed by this particular appointment. And I think on Rishi Sunak's side, particularly when just a few weeks ago he was trying to run as the change candidate against a failed consensus of 30 years, to usher in someone who presided over a lot of those failed orthodoxies in his own time is ridiculous.
And when you think about some of the things that we're grappling with now, like the devastation of some of our public services, and a lot of that was down to the austerity cuts that we saw in the Home Office, in education and other things, in infrastructure under Cameron and George Osborne. Now, look, people voted for that. That was the deal. People, this was because money, there was no money left, famously, after the Labour left power, after the crash. So, people can perhaps understand that. But then there were decisions like not training up more nurses, actually having that cut off on the number of nurses, the number of doctors. Well, that all happened under Cameron. That's one of the reasons why we have the crisis in our NHS workforce right now. There are other things that he did. I mean, I have to say, I like David Cameron as a Prime Minister. I thought he was prime ministerial. I thought the forming that coalition and having at a time post the economic crash, a coalition government, although we didn't get the referendum we've been promised on Brexit, but we wouldn't have won it then, so that's not a bad thing as Brexiteer. I thought that actually it was that sort of grown-up government. There wasn't constant bickering and backstabbing and things. But then he did things like he gave 46 gongs in his resignation honours to Tory donors and his aides and just various people basically he was at university with, other posh people he was at uni with, including, I think it was an OBE for his wife's hairstylist. Now, I'm sorry, but that sort of thing tells you about a human being. It tells you about someone's character. He then, of course, went off to try and make a load of money. He grew up rich, he had loads of money, he's always members had a load of money. He wanted to have more money. He starts lobbying for Greensill, this finance company. What came out post-COVID in terms of the lobbying that David Cameron did to basically when people were dying and people's lives and liberties were being taken away from them, and he was desperately trying, can you give a contract, please, to this company I work for, because I'm going to be up for, tens of millions of pounds in extra bonuses and shares. I mean, I think that's appalling. Not to mention, small point, cozying up as Prime Minister and since as a lobbyist with China. I mean, all of those things, each one of them on its own, I would say, counts against him.
And there's a few things I'd add to that as well, if you think about some of his supposed foreign policy key moments. I mean, he used to refer to the bombing of Libya as his happy place. He thought that was a wonderful thing that happened. Obviously, it completely destabilised that country and the region, made space for jihadists and so on.
I disagree. I think that was already going to happen.
But, I mean, returned slave markets to that country, I think it was an absolute disaster. But that's one thing. The other thing, he is Foreign Secretary, right? So what's one of the big policies in terms of our relations with the outside world is Brexit. He campaigned against Brexit. He even instructed his civil servants not to prepare for Brexit. Yeah. So confident was he that it wasn't going to happen.
That is an incredibly bad
now the
decision.
government is in this weird position where they have to say, well, of course he's committed to global Britain and so on. No one believes this. So you just get back to that question of who is this supposed to please other than Michael Heseltine?
Yeah, I'm just not entirely sure that he's your core constituency. We're told there's going to be this big backlash from the Red Wall Brexiteers. We've already had, some of the usual suspects speaking out about this. Dame Andrea Jenkins, who's, just sort of always being pushed forward to say she's put a letter of no confidence into the 1922 committee. I don't think anything's going to come of that at all. Again, that's just Labour, Labour calling for a resignation every single week from any cabinet minister. But it does just seem to me that we only a few weeks ago, we had, I thought, very welcome news with Rishi Sunak saying, look, we're going to abandon some of the most ludicrous all the net zero policies are ludicrous, but we're going to abandon some of the most obviously ludicrous and expensive ones that impact on families in the next 10 years. not dropping the targets, which is what he does really need to do, and he knows that. I mean, he can crunch numbers, he can read data, he knows perfectly well this is nonsense, but he, again, wants to be liked at the right dinner parties. When we have conspiracy theorists about this big world plan, there's no conspiracy. There's just a lot of people who want people to like them in the right places.
Pathetic than you would think.
It's so much. They're so much weaker and more pathetic, as you say. But that was seen as a sort of big shift to the red wall seats. Working class voters, lower middle class voters can't afford to pay their bills. Being told you're going to have to scrap your car, and basically saying, "Hello, don't worry. I get this. We're going to make sure you can afford things." That had a big appeal. He had a small bump in the polls as a result of that. But now he seems to have gone, oh, that didn't work enough. I don't know how much he thought that would bump in the polls. I'm going to tack back. I've given up on the red wall. I'm going for the blue wall. Is this effectively an indication that the government is just trying to shore up its support in its key sort of blue rinse shires, and it's completely given up on winning the next election, and it's completely given up on working class voters, and it's just going to be going back to this sort of little rump in Gloucestershire?
It certainly feels that way. I think it's quite clear that the Tories' dalliance with populism or a more kind of blue-collar aligned politics is completely over, if it ever actually began. I mean, that brief period where through Brexit they realised there was this constituency who'd been ignored by Labour, who didn't have their values reflected in politics, who were ignored, who were shut out. Them making significant inroads, giving them that remarkable result in 2019. They've obviously just completely abandoned that. But I think it also speaks to the fact that all wings of the party have failed to properly work out what that means, how to properly serve that constituency, what it actually wants.
What was that? What were those voters actually voting for?
And what they weren't voting for.
They think it's all just, it's the bloke with the blonde shaggy hair.
They
think that somehow he sort of appeared on television and went, oh, vote for me. And then they all fell for his spell. Voters aren't that stupid.
Or they're just people who want to hear mean things about homeless people or things like that, because that's what being right-wing and being gruff and, pro-blue collar is. So I think all wings of the party, in a sense, don't really get it. What those voters certainly didn't vote for is this tokenistic czar of common sense. And I think the Esther McVey appointment, although, no shots at Esther McVey herself, just the title of it shows you how lost they are and how much they hold those voters in contempt if they think that's going to be enough to keep them on side.